Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyal? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. And I do welcome you this evening, this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you reside on this beautiful blue planet. Thanks for another breath, another day. And what exciting days we are having. I was talking with Ransom before the show. Really, how many distant early warnings could we include in one episode? Because literally everything you're looking at now is a distant early warning that it is really going to catch up. I mean, it is snowballing so fast. And that's one way to look at things. But for me, my biggest chore or thought process for the day was how to keep the coyotes that are running up and down our fence 10 minutes ago from coming in to get the rest of the chickens and the guinea fowl. Little buggers with green eyes right outside the fence. They took a guinea the other day. They know there's food here. So you see, like, even as we go through our days, you're just going to have to put this end of the world thing aside and, go tend to your watermelons. Like for me, I got to figure out what we're going to do with these coyotes, because these little tricksters, I've learned a lot about them lately. But we have regular days and relationships and, downtime and fun time in the matrix of distraction. Now, as we come into the show tonight, Ransom, thanks for joining me. I got Ransom Godwin with me here, Mountain High TV. You sent me that article about Jupiter's atmosphere heating suddenly 700 degrees Celsius, which is about 1,294 degrees Fahrenheit. Just suddenly, Jupiter's atmosphere increases in heat over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the atmosphere expands 80,000 miles. All at the same time, we're seeing all these distractions on the planet. So I'm still of the volition that the electromagnetic changes on the sun are really what's driving the food shortages. And everything you're seeing on top of that is a distraction to explain away why the food shortages are happening. So if that heated up Jupiter's atmosphere and expanded it, that same field from the sun is affecting our planet. So you see where I'm going with this. All planets in our solar system are affected by the sun's electromagnetic field. And we're in for some changes next year. Ransom Godwin, thank you for joining me tonight.
Yeah, I was looking at this hurricane, and I couldn't help think about all the conversations that we've had over the months, years now, talking about what do you do when the power goes out? What do you do when a life-changing event happens? And all of the possible scenarios that Americans might deal with, or people all over the world, really. And this hurricane kind of sums up everything. You just imagine the people in the swath of that storm. Did they, plan ahead? Did they have plans to what to do, and all of that stuff? And that's an area that they're used to having hurricanes, so they should be ready for at least that type of natural disaster. But I'm sure you've seen the wreckage. It's pretty rough there, and it doesn't seem like a lot of areas prepared at all. Knowing that those type of storms hit that area constantly. I was just watching buildings and, debris and all this stuff that was obviously not something that could withstand even a smaller storm or heavy flooding. And it's just kind of sad to see all of that stuff just wiped away. It's what is there, like 2.5 million people out of electricity right now. So if they had no planning whatsoever, no extra water, no, ways to charge their stuff up to at least have communication, you could just imagine the nightmare on earth there is for some people. And this happens every couple of years. So you would think that us as a nation, or even as a culture, could stop paying attention to distractions long enough to realize that some of these things that change can have catastrophic, effects on everyone's life that lives in a certain area, or, the world as a whole. When we start looking at all of these economic signs that show that they're really, well into the transformation here. I'm sure you saw that article that I sent you talking about that in their view, there will be no digital currency that's private, or you cannot be anonymous. So they know that the change is coming. They know the dollar systems, the fiat currency systems are going to collapse. And you could just see them scrambling to make the new rules for a new world. It's really scary, honestly, seeing it in actual motion. Instead of just thinking it's going to happen in the near future, it's all happening at an exponential rate right around us. Crazier and crazier things keep coming from government officials. Like I was watching in Germany, the police come to someone's house and arrest them because they said a bad word. They said, an opinion that someone didn't like. And you would think that that country, of all the countries in the world, not hinting too much about it, but you would think that country, particularly dealing with the Stasi and the Nazi before them, wouldn't put up with that kind of behavior from a government. Yet here we are in the future, and they put up with the mandates. They put up with this new whatever it is where the police come in. That's happening all over Europe, except for maybe Italy. Seems like they might be going in a different direction. And they're being screamed at, that the lady's a fascist. And I've been watching some of her speeches. It's the most actual anti-fascist speeches I've seen in a long time from any politician. So we are in some very exciting times now. Just think about all the stuff we said, and just that hurricane by itself kind of sums it up. So you can imagine these other catastrophes that are happening all over the place. I'm sure you saw that someone blew up the pipeline, and that's something that we basically, we didn't say it by name, but we were talking about how the war would be escalating and they would be turning off the power as part of that, and here we are. So isn't that ironic? I think they have a new pipeline already ready to go that doesn't involve the Russians, that just happened to be already built there before that happened, though.
I'm still sticking with the philosophy and understanding with the data I have that every time there's an electromagnetic uptick that's visible enough for people on the planet to understand the frequency has changed, the energetic signature has changed, the Van Allen radiation belt that comes in over the South Atlantic anomaly has changed and intensified, and something magnetically on our planet has shifted enough to be visibly conscious with our eyes if you pay attention and you look at the skies. That whenever there's an uptick, just like Jupiter, with the same week that Jupiter did this, we have all these huge events on the planet. Now, you got to wonder, one of two things is happening here. Either we've slipped into madness on this planet, which we have many a time before. The history book is basically our future. Or the electromagnetic changes on the human physiology, on the human body, the way we would have perceived that energy change is being hijacked by the chaos created by all these news stories and narratives. Because you're going to feel something, and everybody was just angsty and agitated this last week. You could just feel it in the air, especially, what was that on the 29th, or it was on the 24th and 25th. You could just really feel something in the air. And then all of a sudden, all these events come, stock market crash, pipelines, this and that, shortages, da-da. Now, what kind of energy would that put off where you'd start to feel a frequency coming out of your body? Or was it around us in the air and elitists had to compensate for it and send out new stimuli to get you into that field so you didn't notice it? It was the other thing that brought you into this heightened skittishness or this faster moving electrical vibration. You feel it like the bzzz in around you. If you're looking for natural causation and you understand that that's part of the cycle, well, then these changes would have to be explained away. And if most people with their waking eyes and thinking minds would be like, whoa, it's a cycle. Okay, there's a lot of big things happening here. Perhaps the agendas being pushed forward, which we always talk about, wouldn't really go forward as fast. Because you got police coming to your door, you were saying because they were saying the wrong words, wrong pronoun, wrong thought. What now, the police coming to your door if your heating is on too high? This is where it's gone to, where they're rationing the power, and if somehow you're able to get around that, your neighbor will narc you out. They'll inform on you, and then the police will be there that you have your thermostat at 20 instead of 19, and you're under arrest and all these things. This is where it's going, where police are coming into your home to test with thermometers to see if your heat's too high in your home. That's insane. And you brought up such a good point about the hurricane, because, as we look out at the landscape here, our world is that hurricane. What is left over? Now imagine if there's nothing coming to rescue those people. If they knew in their heart, mind, and soul that the only way that they would be rescued is they rescue themselves. Like right now, they understand there's a federal government, quote unquote, and I do kind of laugh at that. That might throw some, hyperinflated money down that direction and try to smooth over the problem and bail out all the insurance companies. There's a lifeline there, ish, capital ISH. But imagine a world where something like this were to happen, but there would be no lifeline. Like really, you would have to clean that up yourself. How many people would survive through that, and who would be ready enough with the supplies to grow their own food, purify their own water, get rid of their own waste, and then build and have tools and things left over to be able to rebuild and then start farming again and growing food, because it wouldn't come anymore. There'd be no more supermarkets or supply chains. You know, this is truly where today the realization came in after seeing all these stories, just putting things together. And it's going that direction. 2023 will be the year of reckoning. I thought it was going to be a little bit sooner, like this December, although it could be. I don't know. Things are still speeding up. It speeds up. And even way back in, March, talking about the fertilizer shortages and how that was going to hit food prices at harvest time. Now we are here, and you're starting to see a lot of upsets, mix-ups, currency collapses, bond market collapses, indicators showing, whoa, housing collapse, prices up, inflation here. It's just going to keep amplifying, which swings back in. Is that amplification timed with electromagnetic changes on the sun to explain the frequency change, or the electrical, like just more electricity in the air change that people can perceive and pick up on? Because during that hurricane, I do want to give a shout out, if I could, here to Ryan Hall, y'all. He made broadcasting meteorological history yesterday. Ryan, giving you props on this. So he and his crew that were storm chasing, NBC, CBS, ABC, they just lay low in a hotel and then hope it comes over them. Well, these guys were chasing that, getting straight into the eye wall. And they had like 5 crews out there, all chasing the eye wall of this storm and giving the best updates with live straight from their cars behind buildings to block debris. But they got over 102,000 consistent live viewers on their, broadcast, which was 10 hours yesterday following the hurricane. And he does all extreme weather events like the Kentucky tornadoes and everything. That was one of the best as well. But I was taking notes as I was watching yesterday, and CNN had 13,000 viewers at the time. But he had 102,000. And then ABC had 20,000, NBC had 17,000, Fox had 40,000 for the live broadcast. But even think of that, an independent guy on the net doing his own thing with his crew, giving you better information on real time. I mean, down to the minute, following the tornado warnings, flash flood warnings, plus those guys out there literally chasing the eye of the storm across where none of the majors were. This guy's channel is Ryan Hall, y'all. And he did make history yesterday, 102,000 sustained live subscribers. He blew everybody else's networks away by 5x or more. That's the kind of world we're moving into, away from this centralization. So maybe last thought here, Monero, privacy. How about Pirate Chain, privacy? I don't know. Some of these are going to have to be used. Gold, silver, privacy.
Yeah, there's so many things that people can use for now private currency. How can you get around that with so much inflation? If economies start dropping, how can governments stop people from bartering, from trading silver, from doing all these other things? And that's another thing that think about that. If you were sitting there in that hurricane's path and you're out in the middle of nowhere and you needed someone to take you, you could offer them a couple of nice shiny silver coins to tempt them to help you if they weren't the kind of kind-hearted person to help you. But you have to have those other tradable goods. I read an article that says that the United States owns 46% of the world's guns. Now, I don't know how accurate that is. However, it does, bring up to the mind that that means that there are plenty of people, at least in this part of the world, that will probably try to protect what's theirs. So it's a little bit different than some of these other countries that you were talking about, which is exactly what's going on. What you were talking about is there's little government bureaucrats going around all over Europe, trying to get into people's businesses, homes, hotels, to find out if they've been using, too much heating or too much cooling, so that they could shut them down. And I don't think that they would have ever been brave enough to do that, prior to the pandemic. But after the pandemic, you can see an emboldened government trying to push some of the craziest ideas on humans. and especially about power and consumption. I was showing the audience an article there from Dubai and Saudi Arabia are trying to get the commoners or peasants or whatever you want to call that used to getting little bread loaves out of the this machine that dispenses them. So there's not even a person, handing it out. And it reminds me of during the pandemic, you sent me an article, I forgot where it was from, where they were already getting rice rations. So you could just see these little beta programs everywhere about conditioning the public to getting used to a lower standard of living, not only from the comfort aspect. A lot of first world nations, use electricity and different kinds of fuel to keep them heated, entertained, keep the lights on, that kind of comfortable living. But not only that, but your actual belly. Can you imagine who they would put in charge in the U.S., which you can already see an example of that when the hurricanes come, because, the shipments come in and they start giving lines of needy people a little ration of food and some water to get them by until things get back to normal. But what if there's a situation where we're talking about a long-term wait before things get back to normal? And that kind of gets back to what we've been talking about for years now, is the preparation of these fiat currencies or some other kind of event, making it where food is not as available as it normally would be in our history. And we already know of different times in history where that became a nightmare because people will kill over food. They'll go to war over food. Just the idea that they're not getting their fair share of things recently has shown that mobs of people will burn down businesses, restaurants, gas stations, their own neighborhood, basically. So if you think about that, if you live in any kind of city, odds are if things go, south, people are going to be burning down their own environment. And it's not much different than having a hurricane blow through. It's just like a little hurricane of people blowing through. And if things get even worse than that, I mean, it's pretty bad now. I never would have thought I would have lived into a time. It seems like a Babylon Bee article or something about, I brought this up last week, where the government is telling the army, if you just can't make ends meet, go get food stamps. I mean, think about that really for just a second, about how bad things are becoming, where they're telling you, hey, well, just go get some of that other government assistance. We're spending the money elsewhere, wherever that is. And I think it's in preparation for resetting everything. I don't think people get the extent of the reset we're going through. They think it's just kind of, anecdotal stuff that's happening incrementally, but they're not really doing it incrementally anymore. They're laying out their full plans of digital currencies, rationing, new borders, new rules, international law. I brought up last week that the Chinese government was putting new police offices all over the place in the world. And, I really didn't think about it, but sure enough, here in the United States, they have new offices of Chinese law enforcement to enforce Chinese laws on quote unquote Chinese citizens living in here in the United States. So just think about the amount of power that they've swayed with our government into letting them not only buy, like not individual people. I'm not saying Chinese people are bad or anything weird like that, like people like to twist things nowadays. I'm saying the communist government has big plans for this new reset aftermath. And part of that is having their fingers in the United States. They're buying up land, they're buying up stocks, they're controlling rare earth elements, which basically is the basis of all new technologies, all the gizmos, gadgets that you're used to in the first world. Right now, they have a tight grip on that. And these reshaping of the maps that's going on in Europe and stuff is all about that, I think. And also moving people off of farmland, like we've talked about before. So everything is being rearranged right in front of you, and they're going to keep using whatever disaster or emergency comes up because we live on Earth, so those things are going to happen. I don't know if you noticed this. I sent you an article that kind of showed a satellite picture of this hurricane rolling through, and it's hard to argue that that's not a giant electrical storm. When they put the time lapse on it and you see the spirals of the hurricane and how many lightning strikes are coming off that, it looks like a little galaxy just charged up, sparking off. So things are not only changing in a physical way on Earth, but all of the governments are lining up to deal with that. And it kind of makes you wonder where your place is. Have you been prepping? And it kind of takes you to these disasters. It shows the millions of people that weren't prepared for life-changing events. So what will that life-changing event be for each of us? It could be different, but it looks like the whole world is going to go through a life-changing event. And everybody likes to put dates on it, but it's not really about that. You can see all of these events happening simultaneously, like them busting the gas line. That's a complete act of war. So you know that there will be retaliation for that. I'm not saying who did it. Everybody's pretending like it's still a mystery. There's a few good suspects. Some politicians have talked about destroying that exact pipeline. So if you think about what's going on behind the scenes, you can see that we're really, really, I think, closer than, like, say, the 1961 missile crisis or something like that. We're far beyond that. And I don't think the governments of the world really care about the loss of population, considering that most of them have that as a secondary agenda or maybe a primary agenda right now.
Oh, no. So I'm going to have to start getting back under the desk again. In case something blows off in the vicinity, get under the desk. That'll protect you. Yeah, the long-term preparation, if you're not going to have any help coming to you, at that point, it's not even about preparation. It's more about lifestyle and then regrowing the food you need and forming communities right away that will also trade with other communities that have abundance. Because at that point, you literally there's no more waiting. It can't. You'll never know when the wait is over. So you're just going to have to start thinking about Little House on the Prairie. Literally, that is the perfect example. You would have to set it up again and start growing and raising cattle, raising sheep, goat, whatever. Like, I am trying to protect chickens that are laying eggs now and guinea fowl from coyotes around the property. This is where I am right now today. I'm not thinking about that. Hey, suddenly the hurricane, we don't even have a chicken. How are we going to get it? I'm trying to protect what I got here from just natural predators, not about the human predators. It's that human element, Like, once you start saving your seed and you're able to regrow it and you got your communities functioning, then you're not going to even be thinking about waiting anymore long term. And then the mind frame changes. But there'll be others out there that are going to want to try to harvest your stuff, literally. And, the case in point about human nature is that wealthy bread machine in Dubai where they get free bread for all. There's no human involvement with that because, imagine if you had a starving kid and a mother came up, father came up, whatever, with 2 starving kids, 3 starving kids. Like, can you just give one more loaf or half a loaf or a quarter of a loaf? Please, I got my starving kids. It's automated. No, you get one per family or whatever. That's it. The bread machine cannot be argued with. And they're doing this all across every segment of society. Like, have you tried to go into any Social Security office to get a Social Security card? Banks barely let you in anymore. I mean, everywhere you look, it's almost becoming completely off limits, almost every government building. It was the whole COVID thing. Everything's locked down. They never opened it back up, really. Everything's remote from work, remote from home. Now there's no human element anymore. There's nowhere to go to complain about anything because it's all closed down. The COVID was the reasoning of that. Now, if you saw that Wayfair food riot in the supermarket in Wayfair, I think there was Philadelphia. It's actually a department store, but they have a grocery section inside it. And it seemed like it was flash mobbed. And Ransom, mark my word, did I not tell you back in it had to have been like March or April that they're going to start throwing flash mobs at all these supermarkets as the reason to have armed guards in front of every supermarket as they unveil the digital rationing card? I was very clean talking about that in the very beginning of the year, along with these fertilizer shortages as to what to anticipate as we roll in. We still got October, November, and December. That is 3 very long months and things happening super quick. So look for the flash mobs in the supermarkets. I'll still stay with that. And then we're going to have digital rationing cards by the end of the year. Maybe not at 100%, but for sure some things will be rationed, and you'll have to have some sort of pass with that to prove that you have the card that will allow you the allotment that this card gives you. Because the food, the CCP coming in to control the food in America. Like, you might think they have to be on site to be able to control that, where they'd have to have troops around, 100,000 acres because they got to like control it. But I'm just going back in the chapter of history, and I think you're better versed at this here, Ransom, with the Irish potato famine. During that time, they were still growing food in Ireland and putting it on wagons for export. And there were people literally starving to death on the side of the road as that food passed by them, all with armed guards taking it out. So I'm wondering if it wouldn't be something like that going on, where our vision of it is, okay, well, they'll have to send, 1 million troops over here to control all the farmland. But just a very quick chapter in history back in the 1800s, not even that long ago. Very good records about what happened in the potato famine. They still grew it and exported it. With the sellout of the country, it would be sellout Americans this time. Because people are going to do strange things. If their family can get more bread or more comfort or more heat or those things you talked about, more electricity or more of whatever, they're absolutely going to turn on everybody else to get. You're going to see the most selfish, sickening society rise out of this. Because I worked in China and I saw what it is all about to get the mianzi, or the face, to get that boost in reputation in the community. And the more you're in line with the CCP and selling out your neighbors for infractions of parties speak, the more you're rewarded. And it would not surprise me if it's to the Uber here in America when this goes down. And some of these, really wealthy first world nations, quote unquote, they would be the most selfish because they're not prepared. They're not prepared. So you put them into a corner of starving with their kids or telling on their neighbors that everything they've ever learned about them by knowing them 10 years in your neighborhood and the kids playing together, they're going to rat you out on what you have. See, this is where it's going. It gets so bizarre. Even in Germany, you reference that too. Same, neighborhoods, neighbors who tell on neighbors. It's been like that through history. So I don't know why it would be any different this time, but electrical frequency changing for sure. Oh, can I add one thing? That hurricane yesterday had hail coming down. And even they were commenting on how strange it is hail came down. They had one hurricane in 2015 where hail came down, and that one that stalled over the Bahamas last year also had hail. But it's such a rare event. And you could see that leading edge when it started to come in through Fort Myers and then started heading across Florida. You could see that electrical line, like when that whole entire thing was spinning, it was off the Goes East satellite. And when you saw that thing coming in, you could see that lightning edge of that thing. That was truly a connection from space. Somewhere along there, one of the magnetic field lines was carrying current, in addition to what's being over-energized because Jupiter is as well. So now we saw this superstorm come in, energized front. At the same time, Jupiter's atmosphere expands 80,000 miles. Do you think there's a connection there, Ransom? I'm just wondering.
There might be a connection. It's
electrical.
Definitely. It's funny that you bring up the potato famine because there was a unique set of circumstances there with that. The Irish poor Irish Catholic people, basically the main part of the population. So you could equate that to any population where the lower class is in a ballistic style relationship with their government, we'll say. So anyway, the English had taken over probably 50 years earlier, complete control of all the farmland. And only 100 years earlier, the potato was introduced to Ireland. So you could basically put it this way. A foreign occupation came in, took control of the farmland, and used a crop that was not native to there, that they were not normally or historically relied on. Made that the main source of the crop, and the good crop got shipped to the richer people and overseas, while the infested, potato rot was fed to the commoners, which led to people dying in the streets from infection, starvation, and other things. Kind of a moral to the story there is, where did they go wrong? Well, for one, they started relying on a brand new crop that was only 100 years old in their area for their only source. So there wasn't much growing diversity there. You would think that they would rely on more traditional stuff, but instead they changed over to this heavily potato, farmland. It was just all potato. They used potato as their main source of food for about 60 or something years before this, starvation began. So 1 million people died from that. These are 1 million people that had been, living off of that for a while. But the idea that a foreign, government, people that didn't really live there, some of the Anglo-Irish and the richer British people ran and owned everything. So all of the good food didn't even stay in the local area. It got shipped away. And the rotten food was given to the peasants, basically. So you can see that exactly happening now. And I can give you a little digital example of that kind of. There is an online ordering service from Walmart, and you can order all kinds of stuff on there. There's all kinds of choices of organic food and things like that. However, those same items are not making it to the storefront, to the shelf. So the poorer people that come in to buy a smaller amount of groceries tend to buy the overpriced, smaller portions of everything. And, they go in there and they get trapped by the impulse buying on the ends of in the subliminals. I mean, there's a bunch to that. But on the other end, the people that make bigger, more expensive orders with more organic food can just roll around to the back and pick up the good stuff, so to speak. So it's not as extreme as the potato famine situation, but you could definitely see how that could become more of a practice where things are just not shipped to certain areas. Like I've noticed since the pandemic, they rarely ship choices. And I kind of touched on this last week. There's no choices. There's only like the Walmart brand or some generic brand or somebody that they have a deal with. But there's only 2 choices in a store that probably used to have 6 or 7 choices for each item. You could say, I don't like that. I'm going to buy this. But it shows you that fewer and fewer corporations are really going to be in control of the food output. And this can only go one way in the future, is that only a few companies and government officials are deciding where the food goes. And then when you get into this idea of rationing, you could clearly see that they're not going to send the better of things down to the quote unquote peasants, just like they did in the Irish, potato famine there. It was an artificial famine that happened, but, like 1 million people died just because of their reliance on only one crop. And not only that, having people that made sure that that was the only crop available. And then the food that they did get was, dirty, and it had plight on it and all of that stuff. So you can kind of see the similarities between the GMO foodstuffs at the store and the more, nice frozen vegetables and organic fruits and meats and stuff that don't even make it to certain areas, because the stores know that the medium income level of the area is not going to pay out for these expensive items. So they're shipping it to the more expensive areas. So that kind of is already happening. So you imagine somewhere like in China, if they had a massive famine, guess who's going to get the food? The party is going to get the food, not the peasants. And the same in Europe. These undercover oligarchs, new money, as they call it, the billionaires from the stock market exchanges, those people are not going to suffer during this transition. It's going to be all of the people that we call blue-collar workers and down, which includes, ironically, all of the poor groups of demographics that are constantly used by the elite as a reason why they're changing things. But just like everything, it's a big scam, and the poorest and most vulnerable people in the end will be the victims of all of these new changes, because, they're not setting it up for the common man. It's obvious about that, or they wouldn't be shutting off the easy means of food production, energy production, and freedom.
And with the natural gas going, bye-bye, fertilizers as well. So let me tell you a story. I'm going to include the Amish because I went there just the day before yesterday. So with the Irish potato famine, I did a video yesterday and I was talking about an EU, mandate where Ireland and parts of Wales are going to have to give up 714,000 acres of farmland, which was reclaimed peat bog, and they want to re-wet it. So over these last, say, century and a half, the same, exactly what you're talking. This is the same areas and the same time when they started these projects of draining some of these peat bogs to turn them into more fertile soil, because potatoes grow amazingly well through that peat. So over the last 150 years or longer, they have been draining these, what is saturated peat bogs, out into some incredibly fertile soils. But oh, no, the EU's mandates said that 714,000 acres need to be turned over to the government, and they're going to fill it with water again and break down all the levees and dikes and just refill everything into one giant spushy mess over there. Heirloom Indian corn. Because when you were talking about the Irish potato famine as a single monocrop, we only have yellow corn today, dent corn, if you're going to do the ethanol and the high fructose corn syrup. But think about cracked corn for feed and whatnot. The monocrop is that. But I went over to the Amish because I wanted to order a lamb coming up the first week of November, live weight. So they're still raising it, and it'll be about 110, 115 pounds by the time we get it in the first week of October. Now, when we were there, this guy, he's the one who slaughters calves and lambs and raises them on his own property. Had a son there who's raising all this Indian corn to sell in the Amish market. So, we've been going there for like a year and a half, so we know them. We even stopped by sometime just to say, hey, they'll come up to the house to see how we're doing up here. So he brings us this Indian corn, a bag of it, and it is the most beautiful heirloom original varieties of corn from East Tennessee that you've ever seen. There's like 3 distinct varieties. One's a sunburst corn. It's kind of like the yellow corn, but it also has some red mixed in with it. Each one looks like a starburst guitar, something like this. Each kernel amazing. And there's a really dark purple one. Every single kernel in it's really dark purple. And I know you're a fan of different types of corn. And then the other one's black and yellow alternating. So these 3 very distinct types of corn, heirloom varieties. And if you can find any of this Indian corn, because his son who gave it to us said, I would love to save some of this seed. And he goes, I hope you do. If you grow that, you can grow the same exact color as the seed that you get. So here I am with all this Indian corn trying to save all the seed for this year. I'm just buying the Indian corn. I don't care if it looks pretty. I always ask him, a lot of the kernels have fallen off, and instead of spending, 2 ears for $1 or something for the beautiful hardened, dried out Indian corn, I'm like, hey, that one's already half broken. Can I get like 4 for $1, 5 for $1? And they're like, yeah, just get rid of it. But for me, I'm looking for the seed for that stuff because it's original heirloom variety of messed with tampered DNA, GMO, anything. It's the original corn varieties that the Native Americans had grown here for thousands of years. That's what I'm looking at right now. So let me throw you, since I was there, I stopped and picked up his new price list anyway. So if y'all are listening out here, this is live weight, which means the animals are alive. They're like walking in the pasture, and they weigh them, and that's how much you pay to get the animal. And he will butcher it he'll slaughter it for you. And it's $50 to do that. And he also takes the pelt off, and then he'll quarter it up or into 6 if you like, and then that's the fee for that. So lambs are 70 to 150 pounds, and it's $2.75 per pound live weight right now this year. But get this, last year when we bought it was $2 a pound. So even the Amish have risen their prices from $2 last year to $2.75. He tells me that the feed's more expensive, it's more difficult to get, and just everything's gone up. So they know themselves that they can charge more, even though they raise everything. They have breeding lambs and or breeding sheeps, and a whole set of breeding cows out there. The neighbors get together with a breeding program, and they go from bringing up the heifers through the calf bearing process, all on their own land, all their own corn that they grow for that, and they have out their own pastures and hay, and there's no chemical in that. And they've never been vaccinated, the animals either. So this kind of meat is really, really special. So the calves, if you're going to get a 600-pound or maybe up to 800-pound calf, That's going to be $1.50, excuse me, to $1.80. That's for the beef type. Now, dairy cows, once the dairy cow does its life and the milk production wanes off and they're just basically wasting space, just eating and not producing anything for the companies, they turn them into hamburger. So almost every hamburger that you see out there you've eaten at McDonald's is a dairy cow. So I just needed to differentiate that. Beef cow would be more like an Angus, something like this. If you've seen those all black cows, those are Angus cows. Those are considered beef. And they also have just the regular, what you call steers, like the brown that you would see somewhere in Texas. They have both varieties here. So the dairy type cattle, or the dairy cow, if you want to get one, again, at 600 pounds to 1,000 pounds, that's $1.60 per pound live weight. So, they say, all right, let's weigh the cow. It weighs 1,000 pounds. Before they do anything with it, it's $1,600. Now from there, a 1,000-pound animal is very, you're going to need some help with that. Because I'd never butchered my own full carcass animal before. It's a new thing for me. So we got the lamb in the beginning. It was like 110 pounds, and it took 6 or 7 hours to do it all. And we rented everything down, rented all the fat, cooked all the bones, got those for the dogs. Had some amazing broths. Like, we used every single thing. We hardly wasted anything except maybe the gallbladder. Everything that's cookable for dogs or other types of tripe or something. So that's a skill you might need to know, because for me, if I walked into a community and they had a cow and then everybody's sitting around going, we don't know what to do with it, but we'd like to eat it, I go, all right, well, I have some skills and we can get this thing in the renderable parts. And so this is not something that a lot of people do, and it's my very first time myself to do it as of last year. So moving into this unknown world that we are going to have to put hands-on into the soil, hands-on on your animal rearing and also harvesting of that meat. That's going to be part of our daily lives moving forward. And I really can't believe I'm saying this. We are going back in time to a pioneering lifestyle. We are regressing right now in terms of what a society is, quote unquote, meant to do, that we've read through the history books. It gets bigger, it gets bigger, it gets bigger all the way the last 1,000 years to 2,000 years. There's never been a reset, supposedly, except 535 AD with 3 volcanoes that had a 10-year year without a summer, a decade-long year without a summer. And how many times has society been really reset? Or is it natural, or is it these same, elitist controllers of society who've been around since what? The Babylonians are still here. Even if you go back to the Sumerians and the Babylonians, the King's List, and you can bring that forward. It's the same characters that have tried to retain power for these last, 7,000 years? So I'm really wondering, is it a natural cycle like we're seeing with this grand solar minimum, or is it these same elitists that keep doing this every time to pull society back before we get to this electromagnetic change in the sun's output, and then history is rewritten after the collapse and things move into a new management system? It's a management system that's being reset. It's not the world as you understand it. It's the resetting of the control over humanity. That's what's being reset, because the vibratory pattern's changing. It's literally vibrating faster, so the old ways that you would maintain control over society just won't work any longer. We're coming into a faster vibration, so obviously things are going to change. Cryptocurrency, the speed of Internet of Things, wireless communications, Starlink satellites, quantum satellites too, the quantum network, whatever it is, it's moving faster. So anyway, that's my rant. I could keep going, but I'm not going to. I feel like I ranted too much. Ransom, you got to stop me sometimes, man.
Nah, man, that was great, because we're gonna have to be knowing of ancient things like that, like herding, farming, and all that. And it's funny that you brought up the corn. I've been trying to grow different kinds, and I've noticed that some of them don't grow that tall, some of them grow really tall before they sec, and all this. And you got to keep track of all of these things with your plants in order for them to do well wherever you're at. I mean, because that the whole permaculture idea is kind of finding the spots that they do the best at, and then helping them along, or helping nature along, so that you could reap the benefits of that. And we are going into exactly what you were talking about. And you call it, like you put a pretty nice spin on it, but that's kind of the feudalist system. That's kind of where I think that they want us to go back to, to a pre-industrial civilization while they keep their transhuman civilization going as the management system. And we began the show talking about all of the indications that collapse is happening, and you just can't not see that. Even if you're just not even financially savvy, just me looking through headlines. I kind of recognize the names, but I'm not a fanatic on people's names. Like Larry Summers warns global economic risk approaching pre-Great Recession level. The Wall Street Journal's talking about how even all of the prices are still headed up and they're unlikely to come down soon. Like everything that you've been talking about, say you do have a piece of land and you just need a couple pieces of equipment and you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to get used equipment to save money. But it looks like all of the used cars, used equipment out there are retaining their value because people are starting to get the hint that they're going to need all of these items, and people are buying up what's out there. So there are a lot of people that are savvy to the changes that are going on. And then, there's a lot of people that are just living their lives. And those are the types of people that will, flash mob a grocery store because they're tired of being hungry. And I got to point out that the people that are doing that right now are not hungry. They're not hungry. They're just doing it because just like everything else, I think that they get this weird feeling that things are collapsing anyway, might as well participate in it. And, that is the sign of collapse, is when there's no respect for any kind of societal norms like law or when stealing is just ignored, because you've seen these companies over and over again. And I think that's exactly where it's going. And it's not going to be just food that's locked down with armed guards and things like that. It's going to be all of your other goods and services. I don't think you're going to be able to go to the tire shop here in a couple decades without somebody there with a gun protecting the inventory because people are stealing things. People are pretty brazen now. I mean, the videos go on and on. All you have to do is kind of surf the net for a minute. People are attacking people over just a few dollars, less than $20, putting them in comas. And you can kind of see the entire environment of the human psyche going downhill. That's why more and more people are depressed. And then it goes back to this idea of the way that we live and eat. And I wanted to point out this article to you. The FDA announces a new definition of what's healthy. And when you get into this article by MSN, the Food and Drug Administration announced its new rules Wednesday for nutrition labeling. And when you get into it, what they're saying is as long as they put any kind of fruit, vegetable, or dairy into the product, the FDA is now classifying that as healthy. So all of that food-like stuff you see at the store, they're going to be telling you that that's the healthy food, not the stuff you're growing at home, not the stuff from the farmer, not the stuff from, when you were describing that Amish circumstance, it just made me think, well, how long till the FBI raids them, or the FDA or some other alphabet agency to shut that down? Not because it's hurting anybody, but because they don't want other people noticing that it's a successful way of life. And that's kind of where we're going. They're shutting not just speech, but the ability for us to have societal norms. So, and where do you do that? You start with food. You start with kind of making it hard for a nuclear family to exist with high rent, high bills, high food prices, high gasoline. Everything's going up. Wages are not going up because it's all artificial inflation in the first place. And it's not. A coincidence that people are deciding which, side of the financial world they're getting on, because you can totally see this polarization of the world to decide who's the, last king standing, I guess, of the new world order that's happening. But just think about the basic idea of this. If the government's now telling you that crap food, excuse my language, is healthy, what's in your interest to go find out why you're getting sick and why you don't feel good all the time, or why you can't sleep, or why you have digestion problems? when the entire realm of society is unbalanced, untrue, and things are backwards from the way they really are.
Ice cream should be at the top of the pyramid. That's just me. I'm going to make my own food pyramid. Then I'll get hired by the USDA and the FDA. And you know, funny that you said they would get raided. Oh, they did. They had an FDA inspector come in and tell them that because their eggs were not washed and had not gone through checks at an FDA facility, that the eggs they were selling were technically, well, illegal to show in the open shelf floor space. So you have to go in and get your eggs under the counter. You need to ask them, hey, do you have any eggs today? And they'll go, yeah, we got some here. And then they pull it out from under the counter. They were told by the FDA that they are not allowed to have those eggs out for display because they didn't go through a facility, didn't go through a USDA facility. And they check back every so often. So I was like, well, how often does this happen? And they go, yeah, they come back about every 6 months. You know, and these, that's like coming and saying my chickens and the eggs that I have on my own property are like, you can't give them away or do anything because they haven't been inspected yet. Well, we let them free range pretty good. Like the way we built this chicken coop is I reversed the fence on it. Usually, the bigger squares are at the top of the fence. So I left it on the bottom so they can come out in the morning and then go out and eat all the ticks and bugs and red bugs or whatever, forage around wild out there. And then in the evening, come back and then we'll lock them in the coop afterward. But they've been out all day and then they kind of just come back through the fence. So if they're getting chased by anything, like our dogs are pranksters, they like to play with the chickens. So then they'll just run back through the fence. And it's almost like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. I swear to you, I live in a cartoon land because I saw something so similar to a Tom and Jerry cartoon that I was shocked. Like our dogs chase the chickens around and, make them squawk and this, that, and the other. Well, as soon as the chickens can get through that fence now, what they do is they turn around and they put their nose just like it. They know exactly where the dogs can't come to. And I swear to you, they go 1 inch and taunt them like, like, jeez. But I consider the produce I'm growing here and the birds that we have extremely healthy because it's not just feeding them on like laying crumbles or whatever and scratch grains. We're letting them get out and eat anything they want in a couple 2.5 acres here, and even some of it involves a little bit of forest. That's a lot of space for some birds to walk around and scratch the ground and look for worms and whatever. So they're getting that healthy protein outside what man-made proteins are. They're eating like they would in nature. And I'm starting to realize the symbiosis of allowing animals to feed from nature, and then you help them with the extra protein if you need, and then you nurture them and give them the safety so they can live through everything where they might not otherwise. But have that balance of your animals, your chickens, your whatever, your fish perhaps, are in a pond somewhere in a natural setting where they can get all the goodness from nature. Helps walking around with your shoes off too, getting grounded in the soils. But Thanksgiving, I'm reading this one here on Zero Hedge. Supplies of turkey, eggs, and butter will be extremely tight in the United States. Say, what? I thought we had record production of everything. Thank you, USDA, for your rosy forecasts. So if you love to cook, this upcoming Thanksgiving, for those of you in America, might be a real challenge. So I'm looking at the article a little bit more deeply, and they're talking about the same thing I did yesterday with the turkeys. Turkey prices are up from $1.01 to $1.82 a pound. And it rose just from $1.42 to $1.82 just in a single week. So you're looking at these things that are getting real tight. Lower milk production because they're slaughtering all the cattle because it was too expensive to feed them and it was too dry. And there's some out of balance things happening in nature, and you have to wonder, is it man-made? Could the ionosphere be heated to bend weather patterns? We'll leave it there. David DuByne, right along here with Ransom Godwin. We'll be back after the break.
What would it feel like to have your health and wellness in balance?
All disease is simply the improper replication of the DNA molecule. FCE, full chronic extract, when you grow the plant indoors with no contaminants, and then you get 120 cannabinoids. What that does for your telomeres and for your DNA is incredible. It is absolutely the best as far as being able to get your health back. You know, a good phrase would be is there's no such thing as disease, just the lack of a good immune system. So if you can enhance your immune system, this is definitely the best way to do so. It's definitely the best thing from an immune system standpoint. If you take the position of, I just want to enhance my immune system, 120 cannabinoids is done through what's called the entourage and full plant extract compared to others that are out there and no contaminants. That's what's huge. So there's been tens of millions of dollars put into this and many people have had benefits from it type stuff. So this is about full spectrum and being able to get the entire benefit from the plant. This is the first time ever with a patented process to actually do that. You know, if you take iron supplements, there's 4 different types of iron, and then the challenge is you have to have stuff that goes with it so the body will absorb it.
So this is a lot like when you take vitamin D so you can absorb the other vitamins. You kind of need the full spectrum of vitamins to get the benefit of each individual one.
Absolutely. And the thing that people notice the most is sleep. They have really, really deep sleep and they sleep extremely well. And if they stop taking the product, then immediately their sleep is disrupted again. This is something that the Chinese and Egyptians and so on and so forth. So the research is more than just recent. It's extensive. So full plant extract, it's done indoors, aeroponics. Once you've got that, then you can get the full spectrum. People find that it resets their metabolism. So there'll be a lot of things that they're eating now, including sugar. It'll make it so that you will not desire to be able to consume the things that you're having challenges with. So wheat, dairy, sugar, all these different things. It'll balance your system so that it'll get you to the point where your metabolism is correct and your palate, what you desire to eat, will change drastically.
The entourage effect is a proposed mechanism by which all the cannabis compounds interact exponentially in a synergistic manner to modulate the overall effects of the plant. The benefit of the entourage effect is the increase of the therapeutic experience. More compounds consumed in whole plant medicine typically means a higher likelihood of pain relief, anti-inflammatory action, anxiety relief, just to name a few. The endocannabinoid system, ECS, which is now being recognized as arguably the most important system in the human body, since it provides some degree of master control over all the other systems. In short, the ECS helps to balance many of our physiological systems and supports the body. The fact is, the ECS impacts just about everything, including appetite, immune response, calorie burn, pain and inflammation, and even cellular health. Its most important overall function is homeostasis, which basically means that it helps to keep the body in a healthy balance.
The changes coming up in the food pricing and the inavailability of medicines because China has shut off the spigot for base chemical materials to produce our antibiotics. A lot of things are going to shift. And having something that's produced in the United States that seems it covers 2 different arenas, something that's going to happen with your body because your food choices are going to change. And at the same time, if you're unable to get whatever medicines there are out there, there could be a substitute on a supplement or something more natural side versus the chemical side.
All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm David DuByne along with Ransom Godwin. Before the break, we were talking about rising prices and how this world is shifting into some sort of pioneering pre-industrial / surf world, for a better term. Just wonder how many times this cycle has occurred again and again. Because what do we really know about the 1600s to what we have now? So these cycles of the grand solar minimum in the sun on 400-year iterations, 400-year periods. You know, what could rise and fall, and how could history be distorted? Was it that some of the same technologies bringing us up to what we would consider modern civilization, the 1600s, and then whoosh, they just got thrown back because the modern minimum started in, say, 1640, and it was brought up to that point and then falls back, and you start to look back at different periods of history. Oh, the end of the Roman Empire. Well, maybe they did have, they had compressed air technologies at that point, and then suddenly, whoosh, they fall back around 400 AD. You start to see these ebbs and flows across all continents. Every chapter of history, there seems to be this point, and then it's pulled back. It's like you're trying to walk up a scree slope while you're hiking. You get up, and then you just slide back a little bit. Trying to climb up a sand dune, like a steep sand dune. Same thing, but regulated by overseers. And Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk tonight. It's a listener-supported station. If you consider valuable information like this valuable to help you get more prepared for the changes, consider a donation right there. Donate tab, freedomslips.com at the top. And, Ransom, as we move through these next couple of weeks, I do believe that the realization of what happened to the pipeline is going to set in and really start to shake the markets. It already has. But let me give a quick, how strong was the Nord Stream pipeline? So, there's these 4 different areas where it was blown apart or broken, and you got this idea of it's just like a pipe underground and maybe it broke, because we've all seen pipes. Maybe they're repairing part of the city and you got an irrigation pipe, one of those concrete ones. You can do gravitational vortex power with that same concrete pipe with the inflow. But, we've all seen pipes. So anyway, this Nord Stream pipe, I found this. The steel pipe itself has a wall of 1.6 inches thick of carbon-hardened steel. 1.6 inches thick is the steel. And then another half foot or 6 inches of concrete is wrapped around that with steel reinforced concrete. So they put the wire cage around that of what you consider the steel reinforced, rebar around that 1.6 inches of steel. And then they add 6 inches of concrete on top of that. And that's only one section, and each one section weighs 25 tons. And it's only as long as an 18-wheeler. It's like 45, 50, let's say 45 to 50 feet long. I can't see the exact, but it's on the back of an 18-wheeler, on the back of a rig hanging off a little bit, so we'll say 40 foot. Each one of those sections is that densely and that heavily, girthily built. And you're telling me that thing got blown up in 4 different sections? Come on now. This realization of what this means for the world in terms of loss of energy and loss of what natural gas turns into fertilizers, in my opinion, by the end of the year is going to send shockwaves through the grain markets, because they're going to realize next year, like we talked about the hurricane, it's going to be a little bit of time before any rescue comes out of this, because the lag time on the closure of the fertilizer facilities. And I've done a series of videos on Mike Adams' channel over there on Brighttown TV, even in their studio, about the fertilizer shortages happening, and then all of the smelters and chemical factories closing across Europe. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds closed on a dime. Electricity prices rose 10 to 18x. So one day your electrical bill is $100, the next day it's $1,000, or the next day it's $1,800 for the same electricity in the same building, just days or weeks later. So heavy industry just closed on a dime. A lot of that was already chemical facilities that were producing chemicals that also were involved with fertilizers like ammonia, urea, these types of things. This natural gas that goes offline means the amount of fertilizer has just been taken out at the knees of what we can produce. I mean, if there was even a lifeline to the chemical industry in Europe that could produce fertilizers this year, that was just completely squeezed off. So what we're looking at is 30% of the global fertilizer has just gone offline permanently. It doesn't appear that, at least in this next 12 months, it will come back online. Now, Russia and Belarus over there sitting in the catbird seat on this one. I don't know where we're going to go with the food shortages now. Because when I'm talking about a 30% reduction, it's about this year's atrocious production to knock another 30% off of that. So we'd really be looking somewhere around half the world's fertilizer not being produced next year. The realization when that comes in of how much food will not be produced, in addition to the volcanic eruption from Tonga now sending up so much ash that they are having midwinter temperatures in Australia still, that they're not getting very much done in terms of pre-seasoning the fields to get ready to plant. This is going to be a year without a summer in the southern hemisphere to begin with. And you look at the other ag areas as well, Paraguay, they need to import soybeans. They've lost so much production when they used to be an exporter. The triple La Nina that has been continuing, that should alleviate sometime in May or March, who knows, March, April, May of next year. There's a lot of things happening on this planet that are of the natural effects that are going to also amplify what just happened with these pipelines going down carrying natural gas. Now, that one that was available to transport gas from, I think it was Norway through Denmark or whatever, unmolested, that's going to be just a fraction of what can be taken through these other pipelines. The realization will be here before Thanksgiving hits. In that article I was reading about the cost of everything rising in Thanksgiving being so much higher than it was the previous year, at the same time all this holiday talk is going to go on and people sitting around the tables, it won't be so much about politics. It'll be all about food, inflation, hyperinflation, non-availability, supply chain breakdowns, guards around the supermarkets, and the talk of the impending digital rationing card right around Thanksgiving. So I'm glad I'm hoping to open it up on a happy note there, Ransom. Trying to bring a smiley Thursday evening to everybody out there. Know the problem, then you can find the solution.
Well, at least we don't have to deal with the problems that are going on in Europe right now. I mean, I'm sure you've been looking. There's massive migrations all over, back and forth now because of the new situation between Ukraine and Russia. There's people leaving Russia. There's people fleeing into Russia. There's people going, to the Czech border. And it's just mass chaos. And there's only one other time I've ever seen that's been filmed where people were doing that. And that's World War II. That's when people were running and fleeing and going different places, trying to get out of what they were seeing coming. And I don't think that they're mistaken by that. But the question is where are they going to really go when the situation is becoming dire in most places? So all of these people going into Russia, where are they going to stay? What are they going to do with all of the energy, closing down? And it's funny to me, too, how on the world stage, a lot of countries are trying to blame Russia when Russia is bankrupt. Why would they destroy their own pipeline? I mean, what for? They would just turn it off. There's no need to, blow it up. So I'm not really suspecting them, although they could be doing some kind of false flag there to, start something. But I just doubt it. I think this is clearly just them fighting over who's going to supply Europe with energy. Well, Europe is collapsing. And, when I was there visiting the UK, it was very bizarre to me anyway when I went to the grocery stores, because I already thought they had not a big selection of food. And not only that, the food was, believe it or not, a little unrecognizable to me, even being in another English-speaking nation. So I could just imagine what some of the people that are moving around to these other countries are doing trying to find resources. And then what do the host countries do with all of these extra people that are running from this, that, or the other thing, or maybe they're colonizing, as a lot of them self-proclaim that they're doing. And you could see that seems to be just like if you were in a management position and you had a whole area and you were like, well, look, there's all these problems over here, but look over here, everybody's moving out and there's all these untapped resources. We could just slowly move over there, start tapping resources. And in the meantime, you get the massive population centers used to this new way of, rationing, so to speak, and having to live hard times. How far in the future do you think, because we're really cushioned here in the United States because of, years and years and years of inherited wealth, know-how, property, and things like that. So we could, in theory, in a year or so, get back to farming in the old ways and people could start having gardens on every block. But you would have to have a hard time first before people would snap out of it, wake up, realize that we need to have backup reserves of everything so that we don't have to suffer when these kind of things happen. So how far in the future do you think that people in the U.S. Will catch up? Because it seems like the U.S. and some of the other countries are a little bit delayed on the poverty that's increasing everywhere. We know that it's happening because the metrics say it is here, but it's not so right in your face yet. So how far away do you think that is? I mean, it's hard to put a date on these things, but if you because I know the world economic kind of web of how countries trade with each other, and what happens when they stop trading, it leaves voids of stuff that country is used to getting. So like if we import 20% of this or 30% of that, all of a sudden when that country decides that they need those resources better, they're not going to be sending it. And then, I've looked at maps that show the amount of, import versus export. And almost every state in the United States is dependent in one way or another on either Mexico, Canada, China, or some other, mix of other countries to get their goods, instead of those being made right here in the USA. So a lot of things are not made here anymore. So how long do you think that that's going to actually catch up, the cumulative effect of people not producing here? And actually, I saw an article, I'll try to find it, I have it on my lineup, that's talking about this recession will be saved by the people that produce, the people that invest, and the people that save. And it was talking about how that's the only way that people could come out of this, because if you have a nation or a state or a city or a community that's not producing anything, you are totally dependent either on the government or the world outside of you, which could be shut off. So, like, not trying to, hammer you down to a timeline, but how long do you think the cumulative effects of world events would catch up with the economics here, when all of the economic, strategists and experts are saying we are going into a recession? Matter of fact, everybody pretty much agrees that we're in a recession now. They just don't want to admit it until probably after the next election cycle or the midterms. So when do you think we'll start feeling it? Right about November 8th or right after that?
Well, there's a couple different variables. If you're going to make an equation out of that, you'd have to I'll put two big variables in there for everybody following along, and maybe we can come to some conclusion. There's always others that have that last bit of information that finally make the complete puzzle, solvable. So the first thing would be, how quickly would the supply chain stop? Not slow down or not break, complete breakdown, complete stoppage. That's a factor to think about too. And then if it's even functioning at 10 or 20%, that still means there's inbound and outbound flow of goods and trade. But it would have to come to a near standstill zero, because you got to think about the United States here. Not all areas are going to be affected the same. And leave the politics aside. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about like geography, like-minded of thought, and then, how much agricultural production is already going on in an area, how many ports they have in said area, how many rail lines, how many bridges, how many pipelines are already in these areas that could be utilized for more of a regional versus spreading it out across the entire U.S. So for an example, even if the supply chain's completely locked up in the Southeast U.S. from the world, around the world itself, quickly with the amount of ports that are here just across Louisiana through Florida on the other side, East Coast, all this stuff is going to be repaired. You got some, like Charleston, South Carolina example is a ports up on the East Coast, all the way down in through the Gulf. And if you're going to go over to Alabama as well, like they would instantly start trading with South America on what you consider freight trade, like steamers, you know, for example, like the way it used to be. You know, slow, just smaller vessels transiting between countries. And think about everything that is down here in the U.S. and Southeast U.S. They have everything. They got the factories. There's so many producers of automobiles and different kind of fabricators and high-tech things down here that the ags here, all the high-tech and fabrications here, the ports, the waterways, the railways, and people have a semi-solid belief system that kind of ties it together, the Southeast, y'all. Compared to somewhere like California, which is completely discombobulated, and, you know, like it's so homogeneous that there's nothing to connect between anybody. Although they have the ports, but the mandates there are cutting off any types of electricity and whatnot. I mean, here in the Southeast U.S., there's a huge amount of hydro, but there is in California too. But you can just see the transportation systems would be different, and there's a lot more refiners down around the southern part of the U.S. I mean, almost all those distillates and different fuels are delivered by pipe up to places like New York. Remember when that gas pipeline shut down and everybody's freaking out? Well, all that refining was in the Southeast U.S., sent to other parts of the U.S. So, like, if it broke off, and the Southeast could become its own country again. Easy to do. It would have one of the world's largest economies. It has all the natural resources. It has everything you could possibly do in its own refinement. It has everything you possibly need here to keep a civilization moving forward and thrive, because there'd be so much abundance. But, you know, that Achilles heel of all this high tech, where do the repair parts come from? Yeah, that's supply chain stuff. But if you're looking at just straight economics on how much is being destroyed in the economy right now, in terms of wealth wiped out, I saw something like $4 trillion has been wiped out of people's 401ks here in the U.S. in the last 2 weeks. If you're talking on a dollar per dollar basis, you know, people complaining about Thanksgiving dinner being too expensive. Well, you won the lottery. If you're complaining about how expensive dinner is and you have it in front of you, you won the lottery. There's people that won't have food tonight around the world, and that continues to grow. And I was reading this article earlier today, which I'll try to get on in next week's video. But the amount of actual starvation going on across Africa and the Middle East is astounding right now. The United Nations is calling for emergency relief and immediate help from all nations because it's borderline famine going on. We're not hearing about this. The United Nations just pops out of the woodwork yesterday and says, dude, everybody on deck, we need help, we need help. There's a global thing, and there's so much malnourishment and food insecurity, it's borderline famine. I'm like, wait, I'm not hearing about it in the news here. And if it's that bad already this year, and the rising prices have squeezed those first, you know, the most vulnerable, like third world nations that rely on 100% imports almost, or the most corrupt governments, if they're getting squeezed already at this early juncture, this early stage of it, oh my. What's going to happen next year when they really get squeezed? Like next year, if you're going to put it just in a dollar, all right, I'll say 2023, there's going to be 2 periods, probably around July, and then again coming into the next Thanksgiving of 2023. Because the realization of what happened with the gas pipelines and not enough fertilizer and not enough seed, and we won't have enough fuels and all these things to actually plant the crops coming up in the new harvest or the new planting season for the Northern Hemisphere, after they understand that the Southern Hemisphere is going to go to a year without a summer event where crop yields will be dented at least 40% down there, 30 to 40% naturally. Like once these two factors match up, then you're going to see these skyrocketing prices after that. And then it's really going to start to hit the pocketbook. Because I was looking at, let me see here. I was on Ag Day today. I was looking around. I always look at Ag Day to see what the ag news is. So 87% of manufacturing CEOs are going to hike prices next year to offset costs. Yeah, but then when you look at, let me see, the So, for example, in Missouri, the anhydrous ammonia, well, they need this anhydrous for pre-seasoning the fields. Now, you're good with math, Ransom, so if I make a mistake, please tell me, because I'm just thinking off the fly here. So in 2021, it was $800 a ton. But the spring of 2022, it was $1,500 per ton. So it rose that much. It almost doubled. But then it fell the price. And you know what? They're like, the price fell. It fell to $1,325. So if you're thinking about the difference between 800 and 1,300, and then where it went with that ultimate high price, let's say $700 up, then that means it would be right around $2,000 a ton if it's still available, and just following the previous price movement on it from the fall to the spring. If it's still available and we're not into shortages at that point. And then here's a report from Iowa. $700 for, it was $700 in the fall, 2021. Then it jumped to $1,500 at the end of the fall when they go, oh, there's some fertilizer prices coming in, shortages. And then ultimately in the spring, it went up to $1,700, an increase of $1,000 on the same exact ton of ammonia to put into your fields. So right now it's sitting at $1,400 a ton. It did pull back $300 from the super high prices, but using the same mathematics, if it rose $1,000 from the fall to the spring of 21 to 22, and if we just use that same calculation again, that means it's going to be $2,400 per ton if it's available. But I'm going to say this time it's going to be different. The availability is going to be one of the problems. So it might not be $2,400 a ton. It might be $4,800 or $5,000 a ton. And you know what? They're going to pass it on to you too, and me. And because looking at these CEOs, all manufacturing CEOs are going to hike prices and pass that on, or 87%, excuse me, I misspoke. 87% of all of manufacturing CEOs. So now just do the same thing with the fertilizer price. So if your fertilizer price has doubled and they're going to start passing that on to you, there's no longer they can absorb that. I think an arm of the government's going to pop out and start giving low interest loans to farmers who are going to need to purchase more expensive fertilizers. There's not going to be something like this pop out of the woodwork. It's going to offer farm financing just so they can buy the fertilizer and get a crop in the ground. They're going to pass that on to you too, but that's coming next year. So everything, there's no way you can pretty much get around this by mid-2023. And I'm not even going to say the end in Thanksgiving anymore. So Ransom, I know rambling here again, but let's say no later than July of 2023, the realization of these price rises, Southern Hemisphere production being knocked out, and then how low the harvest was this year, with the forethought of no more fertilizer production coming out of Europe for at least another whole year through one whole growing and planting season yet again into 2024. If they solve the problems, there might be some fertilizer late 2024 from Europe again. This is a long-term thing we're facing here.
Well, you have a viewer on the MIAC channel that's talking about they live in, let's see here, New Zealand, I believe. Let me make sure. New Zealand, and they say that it's still winter there, and that that's right. They live in New Zealand, still winter here. Temperatures in September. The media is trying to make it look all normal, and they're talking about lettuce damage and things like that happening then. So. If you're one of these countries in the Southern Hemisphere, right, and you have, I don't know what the percentage is of whatever they grow and they keep theirself, they're going to have to start looking for other imports. And then when you start thinking about, world events, where are they going to get it? If Brazil has reduced a lot of their growing stuff, and then you got the war in Ukraine there, another hot spot for growing food. China's decided that they're keeping most of their food. You can start to see that things are that there's going to be heads butting and fighting over resources, and especially with articles like this from Mises Wire.
Oh, wait, Ransom, could I stop you for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
It'll just go to a cash market where they'll outbid each other. And whoever has the most money will buy that. There'll always be a seller for it. There'll always be somebody storing something in a warehouse for that higher price. So whoever's going to bid the highest will get it. So it's really coming down to it'll be a money game on who lives and dies.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where I was going. This article's talking about central banks claiming that they're preserving the value of money through inflation, right? If that makes sense. But anyway, and it goes to this next article. Also, these are both by Mises Wire here. But genuine recovery is up to investors, producers, and consumer choice. Right there, that last phrase, consumer choice, is basically what it's going to be put down to for not only countries, but the individual buyer. So part of the way out of these problems is choosing to buy from specific people, because the other people are using it as a money game, exactly like you said, where some people have been hoarding stuff and they're going to be selling those at, hiked prices and different things, which is going to drive the overall prices of things in the world up. And, you can see that in your grocery store there when the prices start going up, and then they tell you, well, it's because of this or because of that. They always give you the excuses about why prices are hiking, and they always use world events, just kind of like Biden. Well, the gas is going up because Russia. Inflation's going up because Russia. The cost of food's going up because of Russia. But all of those things were already happening before anything was going on with Russia or the Ukraine, and they have it all lined up in order to con the public into thinking that we are in such a global disaster. And I know that they're going to start using the climate change angle on part of why the food is not being produced, instead of, all of these other things that line up on why they're reducing production or why they're hiking prices or the money values are going down. And then I also saw a video today by, what's his name, Mike Adams, talking about, are the central banks actually in some kind of secret work? Because it seems like the United States is going out of its way to crush European money. And I know that, like the pound and other things, the sterling, all of that stuff is reducing in value right now. Is this the time? Should we buy some of those other things? Or is this just an indication that they're going to one by one collapse each of these fiat currencies until you have no choice but to use their new digital system? And quoting the guy from the Federal Reserve, it's not going to be an anonymous thing. So do you see a situation here coming up where people are trying to skirt the controls and have their privacy so much that illegal currencies start popping up, as far as like cryptocurrencies and digital currencies, because they're already foreshadowing that they want to have their thumb on any transaction, from small transactions to big transactions, tracked and traced along with all of your other information. So when you're starting to move into a time where people are coming up with new and inventive ways to barter and feed their families, literally, or protect their properties against mortgage rates skyrocketing and things like that, what do you think the governments are going to start moving to, where we can actually see it as far as cryptocurrencies and digital currencies and the right to have privacy on trying to keep your own wealth and be sustainable by yourself? Because the way that they're designing everything is that everything is so interlocked, including your behavior, as you've seen. And there is some good news out there. PayPal, the George Soros company, has actually reversed its position and reopened all of the accounts, because I think that what they were realizing is the new saying, if you go woke, you go broke, is actually a thing. So it goes back to consumer choice. When they banned all of these big accounts off of their platform, they realized how much money they were not able to put their hands in, because, there's a fee on every transaction. So they reversed it. So there may be other companies moving in that direction. But behind the scenes, they want to track and trace every single probably dollar that you spend. And then also on top of that, they have think tanks that are coming up with new ways on how to get people to buy certain things other than other things. They have little propaganda campaigns like, knowing where your food at. This is FDA safe versus the Amish guy that makes homemade cheese, milk, and, they put this kind of consumer control on there so that everything down to the minute dollar, which would be what you were using for basically the rations, is controlled. So how do we get around that in a financial way? Are we literally going to have to start clipping off chunks of silver and having basically black market food transactions and things like that?
Well, that depends. Because you come into the crypto space, like you can tokenize an asset as long as you can show vault receipts for gold or silver and then digitize that. And then you can buy like packs of gold, for example, backed by gold, but it's a stable coin as well. So if you're going to try to exit after your plays here because we're coming into the market crash phase and you want to be out in cash, waiting to pounce on super cheap crypto at the end of this thing in a couple more months. I mean, dude, it's, pennies on the dollar, but they will reinflate to be part of this interim bridge between what we see right now and moving into that full 100% central bank has a wallet for every single person and it covers everything and everybody's got their phones. Between here and then, there's still going to be, Bitcoin and different, like Ethereum's going to run and XRP running a lot of distributed ledger settlements for companies and sovereign or country to country debt settlement. Hashgraph is the same thing. Like we're at blockchain right now, but the ultimate movement over is going to be to Hashgraph, which still fascinates me. I'm trying to learn about it. I just don't know. But I see that's where it's going to be going to. So in about 10 years from now, everybody's blockchain, crypto, blockchain. But at the end of that run, the ultimate goal is to get it to a protocol called Hashgraph. Well, that's no different than getting everybody onto a Fed digital wallet that has universal basic income put in, programmable money, 100%. Between here and there's going to be some steps in between that. Pax Gold, stablecoin, and also backed by gold. And then David Morgan, who is involved with the Load project, they're tokenizing silver. The same thing. So it's in a depository. And if you have that, you can actually go there and get your physical silver with your digital token. So how's that? Like you can travel with that on a memory stick. And when you walk in, do the transaction, and they'll give you that much silver back out in physical off of your wallet. Or you can just hold those tokens. So if you think about digitizing something of value too, like where does that fit in the whole ecosystem of it's not? It's just a settlement instrument of you got gold, I deposited against that gold. I want to either get the gold out physical or I want to get my money back physical. And whatever that trade would be at that time, depending if it, because a lot of people were going way beyond of thinking, if you can program your mind like this is the way I was, when I first got in the crypto space was taught. Never think about the dollar exchange on what you're going to trade against Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other cryptos out there. You always need to program your mind into what does it trade against Bitcoin as itself. Because this is outside the system. So imagine if what you're talking about, Ransom, the fiat had just totally collapsed. Although it doesn't collapse, it seems to do this bouncing down thing where they extract as much wealth out each down leg. But run that to the end. That even happens to the U.S. dollar in the end. Everything's gone, and then just swoop that to the side. Now you're going to have to start trading things in cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin would be the one. So what does that equal when you're looking out at the number of Satoshis or whatnot? You're trading against, then you start to get your mind into these 8 digits. And looking at that currency instead of, it's very difficult to program your mind to look at it like that. Completely away from anything that we know is a stable 1 equals 1. It's going to shift to something equals something else. So is a digitized gold bar on demand that I can go in and pick it up somewhere at the depository, or an on-demand silver bar that's been digitized? That's like gold-backed currency and silver-backed currencies in a digital format. So could they make that illegal? I don't know. I really don't. But there's going to be many ways that people trade amongst themselves. Because you were talking about FDA inspectors and USDA and SWAT teams going to the Amish farm, and you coming down there to buy something. Like, no. I'm coming to visit my neighbor, and I kiss my grits. I'm trading with my neighbor. Get out of here. Because they literally are in the same neighborhood here. They're about a mile from where our property is. It's just a bizarre world where they want to cut down food production so much. But there's always going to be a way that people can move the money. So this is what I'm talking about, that faster vibrational frequency, that faster frequency field that's going to be around our solar system and the spiral arm of our galaxy coming through our star and our regional star system is just going to vibrate faster. Astrology explains this through the 12 signs of the zodiac, and astronomy explains the placement of where we actually sit in the heavens as we transit through in like XY axes or something. They're symbiotic, but you can see the change in frequency means that there needs to be more control, but this fits right into that faster movement of it. So if you can jump into, think about going across the Wild West. You took a wagon of gold. You were a serious target going through anywhere with a wagon of gold, even if it had like 50 armed soldiers with a Gatling guns. That was a huge target. Now, what if you could walk through with a memory stick and go pick the gold up on the other side? This is the future. But that arbitrage between China for gold for $48 an ounce as well. Right now there's $48 more price for the gold in Shanghai than it is over in the London Metals Exchange. There's an arbitrage there. So trying to figure out this chain of custody here of who owns a paper contract that's going to transfer custody of that paper contract to the person in the city that can take physical delivery. And that's another way to transport it. I don't know. There's always going to be ways to think about how ingenious we are. So you think there's 8 billion people on the planet over the last 12,500 years since the Younger Dryas impact. Massive calamities, the 8,000-year cooling that, the emerging society for 4,000 years coming out of the cooling period got to this apex and whacked back. For a couple hundred years or more, the entire 8,000 year prior, the 8,000 year event, 8.2K cooling event, took an entire society, just wiped it out to nothing, and then they started again, 7,000. Whoa, the Sumerians are there. Like, what's going on with these wipeouts up and down here? So all that time, we have found ways to trade and continue to live and have the basics that we need to at least give us the life force and the energies to create and move forward as a society. So I am very confident just looking at history. A, fiat's going to collapse and it's going to go away. It's going to take a new form. B, there will always be a way to transmit value, and there always has been. I don't care if you're trading me 2 eggs for a ticket in the cinema, which they did in Weimar, Germany, after the mark inflated to like 45 billion to $1 when the cinema would show new reels and new films. You could get in for 2 eggs for a seat. And they were saying the very best seat in the house was like luxury boxes, I guess, back then, and waiters, service, etc. would cost you 1 kilogram of butter, 2.2 pounds of butter, and you could have got a box seat in the cinema. So that's what they had gone to. They gone to trade and barter like that, even though you think about it, it's crazy. They had movies, but 2 eggs to get in or a kilogram of butter to get in as your seat payment. There's always going to be things that I'll trade you any shiny brass objects too. Will we come there by 2023? I think, Ransom, is the question you were asking. And I think we'll be somewhat on the way there more deeply where everybody will understand their foot's stuck in mud by no later than July of 2023.
Well, I see it happening already, and it kind of brings to the question here. I see this article. I don't even recognize the website here, but just the title of it is a good question. It's Anti-Globalism is Going Mainstream Around the World. And they're asking the question, if that's happening, does that mean that we're ready for another engineered disaster? Is that about to strike? And I would say yes, they have several up their sleeves. And, it kind of let me go to this new world. What new world are we living in? And
wait, dude, can I break in thought in my brain? You just threw this thought out. Can I throw it? You just, oh man, you hit me on the head with the sledgehammer right then. The pipeline got destroyed, and all the protests across Europe is because the European governments had turned off their own pipelines. They just stopped all the protest movements across Europe in the exact same felled swoop because of energy pricing and energy availability, because there's no more pipeline. You can't get it even if you want it. It's not our fault anymore. It's broken, dude. They just put the fire hose on all the protests across Europe, just like they did with the central banking protests the COVID did in 2019. Damn.
How ironic was that? No, it just
really
shows you that they are moving forward. And what's funny is I was watching a video where Klaus Schwab was talking, and one of the other speakers said something, I forgot what it was, but they used a term for the name of the period of time after the Great Reset, and they've already named it, and they're calling it the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And so what is that going to look like? Well, it seems like that these guys are wanting to engineer it down to the last human being. And this is where I go off a little woo-woo, as you call it. But along with all of these financial things and all of the, different cycles that we're going into, we have a lot of new science coming out. And one being, going back to this thing, the FDA just declaring that basically all the ingredients in your foods are healthy. That's just funny, but half of the world's birds are in decline, species moving ever faster extinction. Now, I know they hype these ideas a little bit because, species have been going extinct at an accelerated rate long before any of our industrial revolutions was happening, all the way since, the Younger Dryas species been disappearing and disappearing and disappearing. But, you get these groups that are complaining about all of these green things that are bad with the earth. And these are the things that we never talk about. None of the TV stations or Klaus Schwab or any of these guys are ever talking about the actual thing that's going on. I'm not really afraid of CO2 plant food. Let's just put it there. So that whole topic to me is kind of nonsensical. But what isn't nonsensical to me is that we are causing extinctions through other means, because we never talk about this deforestation. We never talk about, habitat loss and things like that. They do to an extent, but the CO2 warming planet always takes precedent because that seems to be the scam that actually pays money. But you see these birds, so you can tell the green movement doesn't really care about the big birds. They're getting their wings chopped off and they're flying into these giant fans that don't really work. And then you have other stuff going on, which kind of goes back to what we've talked about before, that we're in a time of extinction and speciation, in my opinion. And here's an article from MSN talking about the mystery of Chernobyl's black frogs, right? Because they're an artificially mutated group of frogs that the radiation has caused them to grow more melanin in their skin to block out more radiation. Now, there's some other animals on Earth, like humans, that also have the same type of system. And it kind of makes you think of the days of what was it that caused Neanderthal to disappear as their own species? And it could have been that they were in a time like now.
Magnetic field reversal.
Right, which is letting in all these cosmic rays, which we know mutates and causes extinction and speciation. But at the same time, we got these, these transhumanists that it just came out, a bunch of these pictures of the hacked monkeys that got hacked up to practice for this Neuralink. And it's, just a horror fest. I'm not going to show any of that. We're also in the era of fast, cheap genome sequencing. And, that sounds great. You can find out who your Grammy was and all that stuff. But actually what this is talking about is the fact that learning machines and other things can reduce the cost of learning a sequence of DNA. And what does that mean? That means that you could basically start an mRNA facility in your basement. It doesn't really cost that much. And we're at that point where not only governments, companies, but any individual with the know-how can buy a little bit of cheap things. So what will be the, engineered crisis next? And we have no idea. So if the big companies and the billionaires are moving in the way of transhumanism, and they're talking about Tesla's AI, they're bragging about it, that it is more sentient than people thought it was, or more sentient than they let on, which is all of these indications that they are transforming the humans that are just alive, walking around slowly through their food, the epigenetics. They're giving them direct gene changes. We're creating new types of human beings constantly, different gene edited versions. They've also proved that they could just grow a human being with no father and no mother in a plastic bag. And I'm sure you've seen the experiments where they grow, sheep or a little lamb or a pig or a horse or whatever in a plastic bag. So we literally are technologically at a point where they no longer need the populace anymore. And now they're getting the people that are going to be the creators of this new system, because a lot of work still has to be done in the transition. So they're going to have to win over a lot of hearts and minds. And judging by the last pandemic, it's not that hard. All you have to do is put out the right amount of propaganda and fear at the right time to get people to change over to something. So what if they talked everybody in the world, let's say hypothetically, that they're at risk for myocarditis or a heart attack or a stroke at ever increasingly young ages? You might want to put a robot in your house to monitor you. They just have these ideas, and we've already had the beta programs with the phones and the tablets, etc. And now they're wanting to put robotics not only inside of you, but in your house, which tells you that they are preparing for a transition to a world with a lot less humans in it. And when you think about all of the countries that are the head of the technological curve, which is like Japan, China, the United States, Germany, France, England, these are all countries in agreement that the world's population is too much, and that we have all of these social problems that we need to address, which causes people to move around, to get balkanized, as the term goes, and start not liking each other, and despising each other. And we have that as a big thing going on in the United States. And think about how simple that they've got human beings, where they got them down to just two parties, thinking that there's only two choices on everything. And it goes all the way down to the grocery store, like I was talking about before. Well, they got this choice, or maybe I'll pay a little bit more for this one other choice. Now, I don't know about you, but that already sounds like the vision of a capitalist communist society that has been predicted. And think about it. You only get two choices of everything. You're not allowed to say this. You're not allowed to say that. We're going to monitor where you go. Recently, I saw an article about bracelets in China that they're now making the bus drivers wear after they just, killed like 35 people that got kidnapped because they might have been positive for some virus. The bus crash killed all those people. So now they're introducing, because you never let an emergency or a catastrophe go to waste, bracelets that keep track, and I kid you not, it keeps track of their emotional status throughout the day. So they will know when to basically fire the person if they're getting too emotional. Now, there's been several movies about this that are very popular, where the pharmaceutical and government agencies are so much in the tracking and tracing business that they're paying attention to your emotional state of mind. And then think about how they could use to implement this by saying that there's a health emergency, whenever they can use statistics that they've been putting out about how like 3 out of 5 people are depressed, or 1 out of 5 teens, or 5 out of 10. They always have a poll or some kind of study to back up their agenda. And we're getting into some really weird times. So I wouldn't even be surprised if we get into the state where people are just totally stricken from the world economics based on their opinions, their emotional state. And, we've already been through these in the past. Different governments have used your geographical location, where you came from, your ethnicity, your skin color. And they're using all of those same tricks again to divide everybody into a world of perpetual fear, while they transition all of the control mechanisms over to a world that has less people and more controls.
The emotional state of mind, that's already hijacked. It's called product sales. Think about the colors and like logos and Fortune 500 companies and every single event and banners and, now, soccer matches in America, football matches across Europe, they have that rotating board. Now it's all digital. It's almost like it switches every 10 seconds. Everything hijacking that emotional state of mind is the product sale to get you when you're at that point of whatever the emotion equals frequency equals vibration is, you tune in and something's more appealing at like 918 versus 712. You know, whatever vibration that is, put a frequency band on it, and then they can, you know, sell you something whatever state you reside in. There's something even in that micro band from 718 to 719, 720, 721. They're all covered. Which brings me to the thought of Greta, where are you? Deforestation and CO2 sequestration. We could make a rhyme, but there's really not time. How about shellfish? Because if you're talking about sequestering CO2, again, you know, they need the fossil fuels to smelt metals to create all this machinery to then sequester the CO2 in well casings, pumps, all these kind of things. They need to push it down into the ground. Or you could just grow a bunch of shellfish by the by the millions of square miles around the coastlines of every estuary and every continent on the planet and sequester that into shells, and you get a food source at the same time. Think of the density of a seashell versus the density of a CO2 molecule squeezed underground. There's a lot more CO2 in a seashell than there is in a cubic meter of air or even a cubic yard of air. It's a strange world we're living in. Ransom, I do appreciate you joining me tonight. One last thought from my end. United States USDA, since you were mentioning them, wants to help farmers now through 3 different states that were completely destroyed by 100-mile-an-hour sideline derecho winds and that huge amount of tornadoes that went through Kentucky. Largest amount of tornadoes ever going through there at the highest speed for like 6 hours on the ground. USDA is going to offer $20 million to rebuild all the facilities in 3 different states. We just sent billions to Ukraine. And our farmers here won't have the storage capacity. And they're offering a piddly, I can't even describe, $20 million to the farmers in America in 3 states to store their grains that have all been destroyed. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grain storage facilities. Hundreds, plural, of them. In those 3 states, and they're going to offer $20 million. But they're sending half a billion over to Ukraine. Sickening. You get that? You can't even divide 20. You could go 500 million by 20. You get into the thousands of times, though. It's just ridiculous. They're not even going to let us store our grain, and they're sending things over to overseas. It's just, I don't know. I'm going to leave it with that. I'm sickified by what happened with the farmers here. We need to get them. We need to get better farming funding for sure.
Yeah, and don't worry about it. If you're active duty, just go get food stamps, you know, because Ukraine matters, man. It's the latest thing. You know, you were making me think when you were talking about the shellfish, because we know that anybody that's paid attention to the topic of climate change and all of that stuff knows that there was a period of massive amounts of animals in the ocean that trapped most of the carbon dioxide in them. And you would think that we would, if we were really worried about stuff like that, right, we wouldn't be cutting down forests like we do. We wouldn't be having the chemical pollutions like we do, because they don't really care about the environment. It's just a way to make money for them in different avenues. But think about it, if they really wanted to get rid of the CO2, why wouldn't they be giving out or building free building materials, say, that are made out of the same type of compounds that these animals make their shells out of? You know, trapping CO2 in it, giving free, long-lasting limestone type, you know, materials. But they don't really care about that. It's obvious. So they ignore the things that are actually happening. You know, like there's tons of genetic pollution out there right now. And that sounds weird, but yeah, whenever you're making lab-grown species and altering the DNA of bacteriums, people, animals, etc., you can't ignore that there's going to be ramifications in the future. And here we are.
Sludge is good for you. Glyphosate is good for everybody. It's the miracle wonder of the agricultural revolution. That stuff needs to be changed also. You're right. I mean, the amount of trees that could be planted, especially fruit-bearing or nut-bearing trees, Why can't we reforest with food for everybody? Say hello to your local shellfish. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to